One of the pillars of a community is the artisan. For as long as humans roam the earth, people have found ways to create practical items in the most beautiful ways. These skills have been passed on through generations and are still a vital part of a community, which is why it's important to keep passing these practices down and continue to create with our hands.
Hello, and welcome to Hearty Artisans. Have you ever been interested in how artisanal products are made? Well, today we'll be looking at cheese making, ceramics, and so much more. But first, I want to bake one of my favorite breads for you today, challah. Let's first look at the ingredients that we'll be making it with. We have yeast, salt, eggs, flour, sugar, oil, and water. Let's begin by activating the yeast. How we're going to do that is we'll be adding warm water to this bowl and adding our yeast and just a little bit of our sugar. So the sugar will give the yeast something to eat while it's frothing around, and the warm water will help it activate. Now, we'll be adding the rest of our wet ingredients. And you just gotta mix that up real good. Now the next thing we want to do is put all of our dry ingredients together, which will be our flour, sugar, and some salt. With both our wet and dry ingredients ready, we will start by slowly mixing the dry into the wet. Let's prepare our board with a little bit of flour. Let's get all this ready. So now what we will be doing is letting it rest. While we wait for our dough to rise, let's take a look at some local businesses here in Wisconsin and how they make their products.
In 1993, Breadsmith was created to give people access to fresh baked artisan bread made by hand.
Traveling around the country, around the world, we saw bread everywhere, primarily in Europe and France, Italy. Great bread. Saw a little bit of it on the coast, East Coast, West Coast of the United States, but nothing in the Midwest. So we decided that really needed something like this in this area. Something simple, flour, water, yeast, and salt, and brought it to this area.
I'm second generation. My dad was a baker. I was a baker my whole life, so I kind of grew up in the industry. I've been working in a bakery since I was 3 years old. What we have here is unique. Our customers can actually see where their bread's coming from. We have the open air concept in our shop, so when you walk in to buy our bread, you see all the way through the shop. You can see the workbench where it's being made. You can see the oven that's actually baking the bread. You can see the workers in the back making the product that you're about to buy. You don't get to see that with other breads around. It's all secret. You never know what's going on there.
We really want to work with passionate people about bread, same passion that we have, and they're looking for the same thing, bringing great bread, kind of like what Grandma used to make. to other parts of the country and to fill a niche there. Work with the community, help out the communities wherever we can, and bring great bread throughout the country.
The shop will rotate the types of bread sold each day so the customers have plenty of variety throughout the week.
There's no chemical additives in our breads. We bake everything from scratch every single day. That really makes a difference in the product, for sure. Flavor-wise, appearance-wise, there's no artificial anything in our product. So we import our equipment actually from Europe. Our stuff comes from Italy. We use Italian ovens and Italian mixers. And there's not much equipment in between. We use large mixers to mix our dough and the large ovens to bake the product at the end. Our day starts out with mixing very large batches of dough to be ready for the day. The middle of the day is spent taking the larger quantities, dividing them and shaping them into the individual loaves and shapes that you need. And at the end of the day, you're working on smaller quantity products, the cookies and sweets and muffins, the smaller items that you're trying to sell.
Each loaf of bread involves a different technique to get the desired outcome. Whether it's dessert bread or sourdough, they all come out unique.
My favorite thing to bake, I think, is the free-form loaves. Several varieties, but when you shape a loaf by hand, you're creating different shapes and different sizes, different products for all the different flavors. And at the end of the day, you're looking at a rack full of artisan bread that you made with your hands, and they all look different.
For me, it would probably be the ciabatta because it's difficult to make and it works great with everything. It has a great flavor, great texture, and something that can be used with lots of different things.
So around the office here, I guess I'm known for making the best country butter top bread that there is. Everybody enjoys that, and when we do make that, I need to make extra loaves to make sure everyone in the office gets them.
It's a great service that these bakers do, not only for our community, but amongst themselves as well.
Union Star Cheese started as a co-op in 1904. The reason it started as a co-op was when they started testing the milk for butterfat. Before that, farmers were just paid on the volume of milk they delivered, not like the components of the milk. And the local farmers around here were upset about that, so they started their own co-op, and they were not going to test for butterfat. And then in a couple years, they switched over to testing for butterfat because it was a very logical system to do. And then they sold the co-op to my great-grandfather's brother, Henry Metzig, in 1911. He ran it, then his daughter and son-in-law took over, and then my parents bought it in 1980. And then this last year, both my wife and I became full owners.
Early in the morning, the factory gets super warm and steamy during the production of the curds.
So the process, what you guys saw today, was we're making cheddar cheese. Most of it's going to go as fresh cheese curds. So we start the day before. We pick up milk from 2 local dairy farms, we bring it back, and then also the day before we make a starter culture. And we start at 4 o'clock in the morning. The reason we start at 4 o'clock is people want the cheese curds fresh. So we just start early, get it out early. First thing we have to do is pasteurize the milk. If we were to make a raw milk cheese, we would have to age it a minimum of 60 days. And obviously we want to sell the curds today, so we pasteurize the milk. And then as we're adding the milk, we add our starter culture. Starter culture feeds off the lactose sugar in the milk and converts it to lactic acid. And then today we made yellow cheese, so we had a yellow coloring. We get it from a natto seed, it's a natural coloring. And then once we get all the milk in the vat, we have an enzyme called rennet, which coagulates the milk. And then we'll cut that coagulated milk and stir and cook those, and that's where the curds and whey start to separate. And then what you saw was the matting process, where we drain off all the whey. We're left with 2 mats of cheese. We cut that in the size of a shoebox and we flip and stack it, and that creates the body of the cheese. So now we're at the point where we're milling it, we're cutting it into small cheese curd shape, and then we're gonna dry salt it, and then we're gonna be ready for sale.
There's a reason everyone loves their cheese curds. They taste best directly after being made.
Wisconsin does have the best farmers, and we do have the best milk. And a lot has to do with our abundant water supply we have in our state. And then one reason I like specifically artisan cheese is every vat's a little bit different, unique, and it's hard to do some of the cheeses on a large scale. Just because it's very much more hand labor and a little more attention to detail, and you can't do it as easily on a larger scale.
Seeing all that bread and cheese is making me hungry, which reminds me, let's see how our dough is doing. Now that we've given our dough time to rise, we can take it out. Yeah. This time, my dough didn't get that many bubbles, but that's all right. I'll be giving it some more time to rise in our pot over here. Now that we have our dough here, what I'm gonna do is mark 5 different segments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, that's good. Now I'll cut it. Now I have 5 different masses. Now, I see this whole bit needs some more dough. And so does this little bit. Now, we need to make 5 nice strands. Now, I'll start by pinching the ends together and tucking it under so that it's kind of a cohesive mass. If I remember this correctly, which it's been a while since I've done this, but this outer will go into the middle, and this outer strand go to the middle as well, and then just keep it kind of tight up there. There, it's coming together. And that's just about as much as we can do. Our fully braided challah. So now we'll go ahead and use our pot we'll be baking this bread in, which is a Dutch oven, as to make a round loaf. While we wait, let's hear from some folks who've been honing their crafts for years.
Instead of being an artisan as a profession, some folks prefer to stick to it as a hobby.
I did pottery in high school, so that was many, many, many years ago, and then I hadn't done it for probably 30 years. And so starting again, it was a little bit difficult to learn how to throw out the wheel, but the hand building stuff just kind of came back naturally. I like to dabble in everything, so I like to throw out the wheel, I like to hand build, I like to do some things with molds, so I like to do all different kinds of things. I go to probably about 4 art fairs a year, the Racine Art Guild, some at River West, so I like to keep it down to only 4 a year so I still have time for other things. I really like glazing because even if you have a simple formula like a simple bowl or a flower pot, you can play around with different glazes and different layers, and then you get really unique outcomes. Like this is, you know, like 4 different glazes mixed together, and so I love the way they run and come out into each other like that. So that's one of my favorite things to do. So.
There are many different ways to sculpt clay, depending on the resources you have available, as well as where your skills lie.
When you're throwing at the wheel, you have to start by centering the clay, and so that's the hardest part for most people to do, because if it has a wobble in it at all, then when you start to pull it up, it'll just get really off base, and that's the biggest challenge with throwing. It kind of depends on which kind of a piece I'm making. Like if I'm throwing something on the wheel, then you start with a ball of clay and you throw it and it opens up. These are hand built. So I'll start with just a big slab of clay and build it up around newspaper or some other kind of form and then sculpt it.
Oftentimes, a creative will be drawn towards a difficult project to challenge their skill and creativity.
You know, again, this is just a simple, basic tray, but then you put 3 different glazes on it, and these are kind of like put on in dollops on top of each other, and then when they're fired, it gives you this sort of nice tortoise shell finish on it. This is a napkin holder, and this is a joint project between me and my wife, so I'll make the form, and then she likes to carve into things, so I'll take it home, and then she carves into it. And then this is actually just one glaze, so it's one glaze that breaks really nicely.
Because ceramics involve 2,000-degree kilns and glaze, it requires a lot of patience and optimism.
I like to make dragon sculptures, and just because of the detail work, getting the face and the nose and the eyes and the mouth and everything right, and the teeth are really hard to do to get them to fit in. And so I've made some bigger dragons and some smaller ones, and the smaller ones are much more of a challenge because using these big hands to get little tiny details is really tough to do. You say to people there's no crying in pottery, because until something is completely finished, there's many, many different ways for things to go wrong. Even if you throw a beautiful bowl, the bottom might crack as it's drying. Even if you get it all off of the bat and everything looks like it's fine, you put it in the first firing, it might crack there, and then you have to glaze it, and then in the second firing, the glaze might run and stick to the shelf and ruin the piece. So there's no crying in pottery. You know, you just have to keep an open mind and be aware that something may go wrong at any point, and the only time you can really be like, okay, this is great, is when it comes out of the kiln the second time.
One has to learn to enjoy the process more than the end result to truly love creating something. So I started to actually crochet around the time of the pandemic. I think a lot of people picked up new hobbies around that time. But I also learned to knit first because I felt like it was easier to kind of make my own materials if I needed to. In fact, I think I made some knitting needles out of a hanger, duct tape, and like some paper. And of course it didn't really work, but you know, you couldn't really go out much, and so I was just trying to find something to do with my time. Later on though, I discovered that crochet is a lot more beginner friendly when it comes to making things, because although knitting, I was able to pick it up a little faster, crochet in the long run is a lot less complicated, believe it or not. And I also started off with making stuffed animals because they were pretty quick and rewarding with really, really big and chunky yarn. And so this is one of them. I followed a pattern. It's just a stingray. And you know, I think this is one of the first patterns that I actually followed because I couldn't just look at a picture and just figure it out on my own. But when it's this kind of really, really chunky yarn, it goes by pretty quickly. And this is its brother. He came shortly after, still had a bunch of this yarn left, but I made this for my girlfriend because I believe an orca was her favorite animal at the time. lot of people will mix up knitting and crochet just because they're both normally hand done and it's just some kind of yarn work. But the key difference is that knitting is a loop inside of a loop, quite literally, as opposed to crochet, which is basically just you making a bunch of knots with a hook. Also in knitting, you use needles instead of a hook. One of my favorite things to do is to make crochet pieces for other people as gifts, or I've even commissioned a few pieces. Like currently I'm working on a dress, a mini dress for one of my friends at school, and it's taking a really long time, but I'm almost done with it, and it'll be really, really cute once it's done. It's a lot more fun to be able to provide those things for your friends because you can't buy crochet items at the store, and the reason being, you can only crochet by hand. You know, knitting can be done by a machine, but crochet, if something's crocheted, you know someone put their time into it. With crochet being a lot more trendy now though, you'll see that clothing stores are trying to mimic crochet pieces, either with some kind of knitting, or sometimes if it's made in a sweatshop, it will be actual crochet, but they're being paid nothing for it, little to nothing. So being able to do that for others and myself is really rewarding because it really is just a skill that has to be honed by someone. It can't just be done by a machine. As a plus size person too, it's really nice to be able to make my own clothes. Although I don't have a whole lot of pieces, I have a few. It can be kind of hard to find things that I really like or that are of my taste in clothing stores because I feel like they all tend to think that all plus size people want to wear the same floral, frilly, long dress or blouse or whatever, and that's just simply not the case. So having control over what I can wear and how it looks and how it fits is really rewarding. And I only hope that I'll be able to continue doing that as I get older.
Looks like our show is coming to an end. But before that, let's see how our bread is doing. So here we have it, our finished loaf. So let's break into it. Yeah, now would you look at that. This is very nice bread to just pull apart and enjoy. And the color on this bread comes from us putting the egg wash on it and putting it in the oven. Yeah. Has a really nice texture to it. I think this is fine bread. Bread always tastes best fresh out of the oven. Something about handmade products makes me appreciate the hard work and dedication that goes into them. That's what makes artisanal goods so special. And I want to thank you for joining me today. Be sure to go out there and support your local artisans.